Welcome to White Pill Radio, the roughly every other episode version of Theology on Air, which is an outgrowth of Theology by the Pint, which is a monthly gathering in Houston around craft beer where very smart, erudite people talk about, social issues, theology, ethics, politics, all of that from a biblical point of view. But there's so much to talk about, we can't do it all in person, so we have to have a podcast, which we have called Theology on Air. Thank you for listening, for subscribing. To learn more, do go to theologybythepint.org. Learn about upcoming events. Our next one in January is about a Catholic, Protestant, and Orthodox representatives sort of debating and finding common cause in their belief system. So you might be interested in that. Check that out. I'm the Protestant. But this is White Pill Radio. This is post-apologetic, ultimately hopeful, applied theology, where we look at Christian worldview through news and current events. I like to say that this is blessed talk, but not happy talk. So, I'm Evan McClanahan. I'm the pastor at First Lutheran here in Houston. And welcome. Glad to have an old-timer back, Adam Ellwanger. Adam, who are you?
I am professor of English at University of Houston downtown, and I do a good bit of writing on politics and culture in a variety of online magazines.
Yes, absolutely. And we were put in touch through my cousin, who you guys write for some of the same folks.
That's right.
And you brought along a friend. It was bring a friend to work today. Yeah.
Yeah, so I'm Paul Fortunato. I'm a colleague of Adam at the University of Houston downtown in the English department. And my Christian background is I am a numerary member of Opus Dei, and that is roughly in the monastic tradition, except that, so I'm celibate, and I live with a bunch of men, 10 men in a house, and we have a common life and common prayer life. But I have a day job. I'm a secular person. I don't wear any specific regalia or anything. And so like Opus Dei spirituality is to bring the Christian life into the middle of the world. And so my cell is in the street, and that's sort of my way of doing things.
Yeah. Well, we're glad to have you, Paul. And you said you had a podcast. People want to find it?
Yes. And it's called Paul Fortunato, my name, The Meaning Crisis. And it's on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, and Spotify. I'm still kind of developing it, but there are some episodes there that you can check out. Yeah.
So there's a meaning crisis in 21st century America. I haven't noticed.
Yeah. If you scratch the limb of the surface, you start to see some stuff.
Yeah, you start to see it, start to see evidence. Well, maybe we'll be talking about that some today. All right. Well, let's jump in. The kind of only story that's been on my news feed lately has been Nick Shirley's expose, really borrowing on a lot of other people's work that has been going on for a long time in Minnesota. But he did highlight in a totally viral video some fraud going on in Minnesota. Daycares that don't have any students seem to be getting millions of dollars. Medical services, like 20 in one building, seem to be congregating in one place with no patients. All seem to be getting all this money. And so just a lot of shenanigans going on. So people are now talking about billions and billions of dollars that is essentially being funneled through the taxpayer, through these various Somali, and I assume other businesses as well. But in this case, it kind of seems like Somalis were imported and sort of are being used to filter tax money to businesses that aren't actually real. They seem to end up being voters in one direction. Money might be going back to campaigns in one direction. Seems to be a rinse kind of repeat thing going on. And could be going on in other states. I mean, people are talking about tens of billions of dollars, maybe hundreds of billions of dollars. Elon Musk is coming out and saying, see, I told you so. You should have let me do the Doge thing. There was at least $1 trillion of fraud we could have found, but you didn't let me. So anyway, so that is going on. And let me just kind of offer one more thing, and then I want to open this up to you guys. But Nick Shirley himself said in a tweet that this isn't a right or left issue. Fraud is fraud. And he said, have you noticed the MSM, mainstream media, and the left are trying to make it political? Well, Elon Musk responded, and he said, well, it should be nonpartisan, but it isn't, because Democrats and their donors are the fraudsters. Okay. And then Dr. Anderson responded to that. Dr. Owen Anderson, who's been on the show, he's at Arizona State University doing yeoman's work and trying to bring gospel clarity to that particular university. You guys might know something about working in the university system. It said that he said this. He said it becomes left versus right because the left teaches 1, oppressed people can do no wrong. 2, oppressed people have the right to take whatever they want from their oppressors. 3, you can't steal stolen land. And 4, the United States is illegitimate. Okay, that's a whole lot to unpack. Maybe before we get to that, any kind of initial thoughts on this expose? I mean, did you guys kind of watch the video? Did you have any thoughts about it?
Go ahead, Paul.
Well, I didn't see the video. I read about it, but
Yeah.
and I guess my quick thought was that that there is an Islamic thing here as well, and it made me think about the grooming gang scandal in the UK, where there was obvious crimes being committed, and the police essentially turned a blind eye or said, well, we don't want to get accused of Islamophobia, so it's probably nothing big. So they just allowed this crime to continue and proliferate. And I think that's what this made me think about as sort of similar.
Yeah.
I think, an angle here I haven't heard a lot of people talking about is, I sympathize with the Somalis in a way. I mean, they come from a culture of corruption, right? They don't know how America works, right? To them, this is just how things are. And the grift is just tastier in America. That's all. I think, though, that if it comes down to is it a left-right thing, well, sure, there's fraud on the right. But this particular type of fraud is distinctively leftist fraud because the left is the main advocates of statism. And that's what this is. This is the big government, generous welfare state model of society. And we see how it works, which is really kind of a neo-feudalism where you farm clients by giving them some kind of perks, and then you sort of roll the dice on your political prospects based on how much you've given out. How many clients do you have?
It's patronage.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah, it's just patronage to an insane, turn it up to 11 degree. And then, you get, and we saw this with like the governor's race in Minneapolis where, Jacob Fry, was it the mayor's race in Minneapolis?
Yes.
Yeah. Where he wins. And, it's like the other Somali group that didn't want to vote for him. Anyways, this whole weird thing. So there's like that whole tribal aspect to it. But yeah, so the grift is real. Cynical Publius, who I follow on X, had a kind of a long post, and he said, look, in much of the world, bribery is normal. Okay, in much of the world, it's tribal warfare. It's you do what you can do for your tribe. And he tells a story of basically being in the military at one point in his life, being, in another country, and it was just routine that tribes would come up to you and offer you bribes. Now, it was never said, hey, it was never a threat. It was just a gift, right? And if you refuse the gift, which you were supposed to do per military code and so on, then it would bring scandal to you. I mean, it could be a real problem because then they would view you as an enemy who was essentially siding with the other tribe. And so it was kind of a dangerous situation to accept or not accept because that's just how rampant bribery is in many cultures. And so his argument was, what do you expect? I mean, this is how they operate in that culture. And so they're going to come here, they're bribable, which is useful to American politicians who can use them to filter and launder money, apparently, which we have in spades. Because at one point, Minneapolis did have like a multi-billion-dollar surplus. So I think they basically are like, well, we got the money. Let's use it, patronage, and it'll come back to us. Everybody wins. And at a smaller level, this is apparently how they've known this fraud was going on at these daycare centers. Okay, so parents would check children in. They have video of this going back to like 2020. Check the children in, then immediately take them home. And so, in other words, so it looked like they were there, so they'd get the money from the government, and then the parents got a kickback on that. So it's just kickback after kickback after kickback. And I guess, it's as old as, Godfather Part 2, and actually much older than that. But another post, which was from Bill Ackman, who I'm not a huge fan of in every situation, but he said, well, something about this is obviously not right because 80% of these people are on welfare. Why do they need childcare? It's like the whole point is that you're at home without work, and so we're helping you raise your child. Why do you also need daycare? So it's just obviously fraudulent on its face. So, and so I think, I'm with you in that. It's not their fault. They're probably being used in a much bigger game as sort of political pawns,
Mhm.
as an easy way to launder money and power and votes and all of that. Um, at the same time, it has been another like gas pedal on all of our immigration debates and mass deportation debates and all of that. So
Well, I mean, I would also note in the Jacob Fry election that you're talking about, even though the Somali vote split, a leftist still won.
yeah,
Right. The system
right,
works.
right, right. Yes,
And I would also say I think this is an interesting angle that there's been this push from the left for many years for universal pre-K. And I think that this begs the question of, well, is this the reason that this was such a push? That was universal pre-K always sort of an alternate term for universal basic income
Mm.
for immigrants? Of course, like the fact that these are Somalis serve the left in different ways, right? What we get is this endless diversification of the rich tapestry of culture that we have here in the United States. We get the diversity and inclusion that we want, and in some way, it's insulated from attack because the second you call this out, as we see,
yeah,
right, you're a bigot.
right. Right, and
Yeah.
that was at the street level. You know,
Right.
there was another video that kind of a follow up where someone sort of goes up to Nick Shirley and says basically, "Why do you hate Muslims?" You know, and his point is he keeps trying to say it's not fraud, or it's only fraud. It doesn't matter who's committing it. I'm opposed to it. Now that gets us back to this kind of tweet, which is true enough that fraud is fraud and it's bad who is ever doing it and so on and so forth. I mean, one of the best arguments for like limited government, which is I realize a quaint argument at this point, but like one of the best argument for is that it simply precludes the possibility of fraud. You know, if the government doesn't have any money, then you can't commit fraud with it. But when it has $7 trillion and we print our own money and $2 trillion deficits don't matter to anybody, well, this is exactly what's going to happen. You're going to create incentives to hand out money for patronage. Okay, but and again, I'm sure there are examples of left, like fraud on the right. I mean, I don't know, maybe we're kind of pro-military and that's where a lot of our fraud happens. We have $1 trillion, military budget. Maybe we're paying, maybe people are getting kickbacks on those $2,000 toilets or something like that. I don't know. But, the left has used this kind of moral blackmail, for forever, really, but definitely for decades, which is that when you establish an oppressor dynamic as the worldview through which you see everything, then those who are in the oppressed category get special privileges. That's just the way it works. That's what Marxism is. I mean, you have to take from the oppressors and give it to the oppressed until you achieve the classless, stateless society.
Reparations.
Yeah, it's reparations through another way. So, and yes, it is extremely difficult to speak poorly of these oppressed people. I mean, it's what we used to call political correctness, but it becomes the language of equity and then the process of equity. And so when we have, for example, he says you can't steal stolen land. In other words, yeah. So this whole thing about land acknowledgments, is that it basically delegitimizes the United States. Well, that's the point number 4. If the United States itself is not legitimate, as a nation, given 1619, given stolen land, given our, the Native Americans, given the Civil War, given whatever, then we have no moral authority to say to another culture, you are doing wrong. So I think those are hallmarks of the left. Okay, the oppressed-oppressor dynamic is simply it is definitional to the modern left, and if someone could say otherwise, I'd be all ears. But that does lead to certain effects, and one of those effects is that we actually encourage then the oppressed group, so-called, to commit fraud like this.
We cultivate grievance, and I think it's important to note that these are oppressor and oppressed are useful terms because there are oppressed people and there are oppressors.
Yeah.
And so you can't just wave away the terminology. what happens is it gets fetishized.
Yeah.
Where this is the unit of value in terms of personhood.
Yeah.
And this inverts the tables. It makes oppression into a good, rather than an evil.
Right.
Yeah, and it's sort of the unpardonable sin. Like, so how much reparation should I give? And the answer is it's infinite.
Yeah.
You will never give enough, and so you just have to continually like bow and scrape and so it's it's the infinite sin.
Yeah.
with
Well,
infinite.
when we talk about like the victim matrix, right? Intersectionality. Your oppression, your degree of oppression becomes currency, right? And the more intersectionals you have, the more currency you have. So the old joke, right, is the black, trans, lesbian, disabled.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, you're checking off all the boxes. So you're at the, and so a Somali immigrant is way up on that list as well. They're an immigrant, they're black, they're female.
Especially if they're gay.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't know that they survive, if they are, but yeah. So I think that it's a cliche at this point, but we really have to fight that worldview. I think we have to continue to fight cultural Marxism. We have to see it where it is, and I think maybe one of the things that Nick Shirley's video did is it kind of pierced this veil a little bit of like, you know what?
Pun intended.
Hey guys, Sarah Stone here. Sorry to interrupt what I'm sure is a riveting podcast episode, but Theology by the Pint needs your help to continue providing these podcasts, offering our in-person events, and growing so we can bring thoughtful conversation and the hope of the gospel to a world that's increasingly walking away from church and from faith. Now that we're a 501c3 nonprofit, all donations are tax deductible, so we've crunched the numbers, and if each listener of this episode gave just $1 for each episode you listen to, we'd put a huge dent in our annual budget. So consider giving today. Go to theologybythepint.org/give and click the link to donate. Thanks so much, and now back to our show.
Yes. There was a lot of head covering, that's for sure. But yeah, I think the right, broadly speaking, is kind of at that point where we're going, we just don't care anymore. We're ready to, we're definitely ready for mass migration. Although it says Trump supposedly is losing popularity on that. I don't know. Maybe that was before this video. But I think that there are a lot of people who are content to do the dirt. Here's the difficulty with all this, though. It's really easy to import people. It's really hard to deport them. It's really easy because you bring them in under some asylum claim or something like that in mass, but to deport, it's like an individualized process, or you hand. It's easy for a corrupt government. I'm not saying they're corrupt, but they are. Anyway, it's easy to hand out millions and billions of dollars, just with a couple of clicks on a government website, but to now investigate each one of those businesses, each one of those LLCs, you can't really do that in mass. You have to look at each one. So this is how evil kind of proliferates, generally speaking, but in this case specifically, because it's so much easier to do that than to do the right thing.
Well, I'm reminded of the Carl Schmitt quote, sovereign is he who decides the exception. And the question is, who gets to decide when laws and protocol will be followed? And with mass migration, this is it, right? There's not an inch of bureaucratic red tape that keeps people from coming in.
Yeah.
Right. But as soon as we want to get them out, well,
right.
Every norm and law and miles of bureaucratic red tape will be thrown up to ensure that can't happen. Right. And this is how we know who's actually in power.
Yeah.
One of the ways I think that we defeat this logic of what you're talking about is just to say what's true. None of this land was stolen. It was conquered.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And there's a difference. And conquest is ahistorical because it's always happened.
It is a period historical. It's not ahistorical.
Yes.
Yeah.
And It is ahistorical. That's what I'm saying.
Oh, it is. Oh,
Yeah,
you're using the
I'm
word.
saying it has no
I thought you were
history.
going to make a list, A, B, C, D.
No,
Okay, okay.
I'm saying it's so old that it has no history. It's
Oh,
just a
oh, I see what you're
fundamental
saying. I
part
got
of society and
Yeah.
civilization. And it's only in our case where conquest all of a sudden became bad, right?
Right.
Everywhere else it's fine.
Yeah.
We have to reject that logic.
Yeah, agreed. Yeah, we've talked about Native Americans a lot. Every time you come on, we end up talking about Native Americans. So I don't know, Adam. No,
I love the Native Americans, by the way.
Yeah, there's a
Huge fan of the Native Americans.
Yeah. I want to announce that I have finished my George Washington biography because I mention that every time. But Native Americans come up a lot there, obviously. Dealing with the French and Indian War, and later as president and so on. How do you deal with those people? So it is quite complicated, but. Like we seem hamstrung by past sort of sins of conquering land or slavery, which, we're not defending either, although the British did bring that to us. And that was one of our complaints in the Declaration of Institution, is that the king instituted slavery on this land. And, now we're having a hard time getting rid of it. Yes. So I agree with you. I think we have to sort of just be proud about, or at least unapologetic about where we are. And then why don't we look on the positive from time to time? Like what our country has done, some of the positive things we've done. When we put men on the moon, we've developed the microchip. We're the most charitable, nation on earth. We've built, the level of the lack of poverty in this country is unprecedented. Even the poor in this country live better than most kings of historical, there's no, I know that might sound crazy to people who are like, what are you talking about? The poverty rate hasn't changed in 50 years. Well, yes, but the poor today live much better than the poor did 50 years ago. It's not even close.
I also think there's something to what Paul was saying about this sort of invocation of original sin in the way we talk about these things.
Yeah.
I think the most famous instance of that was Obama's speech when he was trying to get out from under the millstone of Jeremiah Wright, and he said, we need to talk about America's original sin of slavery. Of course, original sin cannot be undone. And that's the point. That's why that metaphor gets used to do exactly what you were saying, where it's, you cannot ever complete the atonement, right? It's got to go on and on and on. And that's by design.
Well, wait a minute. You do think it can be undone, right? You're saying, but in political parlance, it's used in that way.
Yes.
As a cudgel.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, if you're white, you will never do enough, and you have to just continually acknowledge and make land acknowledgments. And like there was an article I was reading from a Harvard professor who's leaving Harvard. He's going to University of Florida, that new program, Hamilton program.
It just the article came out yesterday, I think.
Maybe, yeah.
Anyway, go ahead.
And he was saying one of the reasons he was upset at Harvard was that he had all these great graduate students who were coming through, who were brilliant, and normally they would get jobs because they were Harvard, they were very accomplished. But he noticed this pattern that all of the white male graduates with PhDs from Harvard weren't getting jobs, and he was just couldn't figure this out, and it was absolutely clear what was going on. These people were just shut out. Like the policy across the United States was do not hire white males, and it's like, okay, this is how we continually do our reparations, and this is considered justice. This is considered excellence in education, and anyway, it's just it's destroying.
An article that went totally viral that we never talked about on this show was the Compact magazine article, The Lost Generation.
Right.
Jacob, I can't remember his name, wrote it. Anyway, won't be hard to find, but it was about DEI, and he kind of, the power of that article wasn't that he was saying anything new. I mean, most people on the right were well aware of the fact that white men had been systematically kind of removed from boardrooms, writers' rooms, in his example in Hollywood, corporate offices, that boomers were essentially undercutting, white male boomers were undercutting younger white males to get the diversity quotas into their corporations for whatever reason. We've kind of known that was happening, but what he did do successfully and helpfully, I think, was he kind of mainstreamed this context so that even the normie is like, oh, it is happening. right? So this is the celebration parallax, right? Where it's not happening, but it's good that it is, right? And so now he's kind of it at least brought us to the point of saying, okay, it is happening. It's not a fringe conspiracy theory. And as the son of a white male, I mean, I'm literally parenting and thinking of what is the education that you need to not, I mean, I've always said college, like, no offense to my fellow professors here, but take it or leave it, okay? Like
Yep.
we're actually doing college degrees in high school as homeschoolers, okay? Because just I'm I've never been impressed with elite institutions, okay? I mean, yes, some very complex things are taking place at Rice University. I got that, and other schools, some research and all that, but I just don't care. And I'm like, and don't go looking to work at the accounting firm, the big five or whatever they are, or the white shoe law firms, or the advanced medical research, whatever. Who cares? Just don't seek that, authorization. Work for yourself. Have some kind of a trade that doesn't matter if you're white or male. You're going to have a skill that people are going to need so badly you can't be shut out. So make yourself. I'm sorry, I'm giving you guys. This is what I say to my son, not to y'all. But this is how But I have to think about that because I live in a world where I do think it's a real thing that white men aren't going to be easily given these sorts of. I'm not saying it's impossible, just not as easily, it's not as common. They're going to be given these kind of prestigious positions. So I think that's real, and that's been normalized.
Forthrightly say, I finished my PhD in 2009 and got a number of tenure track offers the same year. If I had finished my degree, I think probably 5 years later, I would not have gotten a job.
Yeah. You'd be driving Uber right now.
Probably not. But I don't know what I'd be doing.
Yeah.
Because at this point, I'm unfit for any other variety of employment.
I hear you. Well, I'm glad you're where you are then for that. Yeah, but I hear you. But yeah, I mean, if my son said, yeah, I think I'm going to go into, get a PhD in literature. Yeah, I'd be like, absolutely not, for a lot of reasons, but absolutely not. So anyway, okay, well, I think we saw the Somali problem. It's going to be a major issue for a long time. I mean, I think whether or not, Minnesota remains a deep blue state, I think it will. For the same reasons that California and New York will, because they're hollowing out, every kind of person who doesn't want to pay the confiscatory taxes or deal with the fraud is leaving the state, and so Texas maybe will benefit. We might have a lot of you sure you betcha types, showing up all of a sudden, which is good for me because a lot of them are Lutheran. Although I will say, on the front page of our church website, I say that we are not in the ELCA and we have nothing to do with any ELCA ministries because it was the Lutheran Immigration Relief Services who changed their name to something else now, more branded. But they were who facilitated this. That's why there are all these Somalis in these places.
Oh.
Yeah, it was, just like at the border, that group got millions upon millions of dollars, and so when they talk about Catholic Charities and Lutheran Refugee Services, that was my former denomination, and that's one of the reasons we left that denomination. So, all right, well, okay, immigration, big topic. Let's jump to another one, which is technology and how we should relate to it. So, Paul, this is yours. So give us a summary here.
So, gosh, I just got this book. It's called Against the Machine, The Unmaking of Humanity, I think, by Paul Kingsnorth. And I listened to this podcast where he was interviewed by Ross Douthat. And gosh, there's a lot of things. But one thing, I'll start with the most sensational, is Paul Kingsnorth's thesis or hypothesis that AI is partly demonic. And what does he mean by that? So he offers this evidence, and I don't agree with it completely, but I think there might be something here. He says the internet is kind of like a giant Ouija board, in that like you're kind of like using it in the AI specifically because it's giving you all these answers and stuff, and you think, oh, this is coming out of like a wise resource of information, which it is. I mean, I use ChatGPT. I think it's a very great thing. I like it, but he says this thing that the men, and mostly the men who are developing AI, are the ones who are saying this thing could very well destroy humanity. And like one of the guys, I forget who it is in Britain, who's like the AI guy in Britain, says that he estimates that there's about a 20% chance that AI will destroy humanity. And yet he's pushing it. And it's like, why? Why are you pushing this thing so fast and like at such an accelerated rate? And there's like billions of dollars getting poured into this and all the energy and stuff. Like, why is this so fast? And like, ChatGPT started 3 years ago, and now it's essentially universal. Like, how did this super fast acceleration happen? And his hypothesis is that maybe there's a spiritual being that's kind of like, or beings that are kind of participating in this thing, and pushing it. Now, what do you think? I don't know. It's kind of wild.
Many thoughts. I mean, the first thing that I would say is, and I've written a little bit about this, that this is one of my refrains: technological advancement is the least democratic force on the planet, right? There is no political check on technological development. And so it can't be controlled. And a big part of that is because at this point, the state is so dependent on these technologies to administrate society that it can't hold them back.
And we're in an AI arms race, so we don't want to, because the Chinese will gain the upper edge or whatever.
That also. But in terms of, the God quest on this, there's a lot to say about that. Certainly, I think that's explicitly the goal for many of these developers, is to create a digital God. And of course, that's what science always is. All science is the name we give to magic that works. That's it. The aim is to overcome nature. Oppenheimer, in an interview, you can find it on YouTube. It's one rather late in his life, and they were asking him about the motives of the men who worked on the Manhattan Project. And the interviewer is kind of expecting him to say, well, we had to win the war. We had to, beat the Germans. And what Oppenheimer's argument essentially was most of those men were motivated by just to see if we could do it, right? We just wanted to see if we have the power to crack this nut.
Yeah.
And I think that drives a lot of technological advancements. But let's say, for the sake of argument, that they are creating a God. Well, what are the contours of this God? And interestingly, where they seem to locate the divinity is in knowledge. How much it knows. It knows this, it knows that, it knows this other thing. It knows how to fix your sink, it knows this, it knows everything. And what you end up with is a weird kind of Gnosticism or gnosis, where, the substance of the divinity is purely in terms of factual knowledge. It's a strange vision of divinity.
Yeah.
And I could go on at length, but I'll let somebody else talk.
Have you ever watched a YouTube video, right, where you have this knowledge, right, on how to fix something, but it's not your exact problem, and it's like, well, my car is 1 year off from this video, so it doesn't have that part or something like that. That's kind of how I think about AI. It's like, it's always just a little off, so it's like, yeah, there's all this knowledge, but it's not quite right. So, but I agree with you. In other words, a mechanic has the ability to take a certain amount of knowledge and apply it to a specific situation. You might call that wisdom, and that's the shortfall of knowledge. Like, knowledge, it's the fear of the Lord that's beginning of wisdom, so that's the difference between a machine and a human, is that we're endowed in this way with the correct application of knowledge, but AI doesn't do that. And we'll give some examples of that maybe later, but I want to say two things about it. The first question I think is interesting, whether or not demons are in AI. I think if we kind of go backwards a little bit, there's a question of like, well, where can demons dwell? Let's just answer that generally speaking. Okay. For example, people will say that a house is haunted, and then about a decade ago, I noticed it became popular for people, in all these ghost shows or what have you. People would say, no, people are haunted. Like, well, wait a minute. Is the ghost in the attic, or is the ghost in the person? What's going on? And I don't think there's consensus about that. Catholic exorcists will talk about various forms of oppression or, demonic activity and, possession being kind of the end of the road and quite rare and so on and so forth. I'm inclined to believe and agree with all of that. But there's a question of like, if a demon can sort of be, if the demonic realm, which does exist, it's not that the devil's the king of this world or anything like that. I don't believe that. But if the demonic realm is present and real and it can be here, well, why couldn't it be in a kind of cloud network or something to that effect? Is that a real thing? Well, yeah, it's interacting with people. And so can the devil be there? Yeah. Now, I might balance that by saying, in fact, the the article, that interview that Rouse Douthat had says the spiritual darkness driving Silicon Valley. Okay, AI is nothing more than a collection of inputs. And so, and someone is choosing what the inputs are, right? I mean, so there are, so ChatGPT gets its information from somewhere, and there's some governor on that, right? Like it's not pulling from 4chan, or it is pulling from 4chan, or it's not pulling from Reddit, or it is pulling from Reddit, and so on. And so someone is making that choice, and therefore it's going to feed the AI and create AI in a certain kind of way. And so then the question is, what are the spiritual beliefs of the people in Silicon Valley? Because ultimately, if AI it possesses a worldview because it brings in certain information which will definitively then create this worldview, right? The absence of some knowledge, the inclusion of some other knowledge. Then what is the worldview of the people creating the AI? Because that will likely create a worldview within the AI.
And I think Paul Kingsnorth has a specific answer to that question, so he calls the whole project the machine, capital M, which is this human drive to create a god or to make man his own god. And what are the aspects of the worldview for him? And I'm just remembering as well as I can. One is that the human being is not a creature, it's a machine with parts, and you can just assemble it like a Frankenstein.
Yeah.
And so that's what a human is. There's nothing sacred. There's nothing, and so we can shape man. We can redesign him. We can merge with the machine. We're going to have that moment of
singularity.
The singularity where we merge with the machine, or we can just upload our consciousness to the machine and live forever. Mm-hmm. So they have a kind of theology of eternal life, of what's the goal? No pain, zero suffering. Like, and anyone who allows suffering is the devil. So like Christianity is very demonic for them because Christianity says accept suffering. Suffering is part of growth. Suffering is part of like uniting with Christ. And
it's part of being a creature.
And part of being a creature, like accepting like your limitedness. And like accept no limits. Like, should I design my baby? Why wouldn't I? Like you're so evil because you're not letting me design the perfect baby with like brilliant genes.
I could eliminate cancer and ensure this
mm-hmm.
child never suffers.
Yeah,
right. So anyway, it's a really kind of flipped over theology of what man is. And
by the way, I would say mRNA is a kind of more uncivilized form of that, if you will. In the sense that it was. I think mRNA was. I think going to be the kind of golden goose of medicine of the future, where you could program medicine to tackle this and tackle that. And that is the mechanized view of everything, right? The joke is that Bill Gates, is a software guy, right? And, his whole job was to create a virus-free operating system. And so then he moved on to vaccines with the same kind of idea. Of course, it doesn't work because, biology has this weird way of fighting back. But I interrupted what you were going to say.
But, okay, so you said that AI is nothing but a collection of inputs. And essentially what Paul is saying, I think he's right, is that from the perspective of science, the human is nothing but a collection of inputs. Now, this begs the question, people say, well, AI isn't conscious. It's not conscious. Well, there's this question, and I'm thinking about Baudrillard here, like simulacra and simulation. At what point does the copy have such a high fidelity, right, that it, for all intents and purposes, is the thing, right? So I guess what I'm saying in layman's terms is if it looks like a duck and quacks like a duck, right, then what else do we call it but a duck? And so I think we need to start taking the idea of consciousness in AI more seriously. It doesn't matter if biochemically it operates like we do. It has all the features of how we understand the manifestation of consciousness.
Yeah.
So, I think it's something we should not laugh off, right?
I hear you. Is it possible though that it has some fatal flaws? And I'll give you three that I've heard recently. The first is that the inputs are going to get worse because it's going to self-feed, right? You're going to have bad AI. You're going to have
Feeding AI.
Yeah. So that it's going to end up not being able to, tell you, simple math problems or something like that. So it could end up proving to be less helpful. I mean, okay, so that's problem number one. Problem number two is, it codes, but like one guy said, this was one, I think, Kunstler's podcast or something, where he's interviewing somebody about this. And he said, it can code really fast in an hour, but then I have to spend 3 hours, making sure the code is correct. Or troubleshooting this one little thing it got wrong that made everything else go wrong, when it would have been faster just to do it myself. So it's not quite there. And then third is the energy it takes and the water that it takes. So as AI kind of grows exponentially, and this is a concern about it being economically an AI bubble bursting, is that the chip production, the water resources, the energy, they're just not there. You just can't keep growing at this rate. And since the entire stock market at this point is dependent on future AI growth, because it's all futures. None of it is that Ford sold more cars this year.
It's a casino.
It's a casino. And you just have these huge derivatives, derivative kind of markets around AI, so anyway, and so in that sense, the economy could sort of solve the AI problem for us, and that it's just going to be limited in development because we literally don't have the power, because nuclear power is 10 years away. Now, there is some thought about this fusion, Truth Social and some fusion company like merged recently. I don't know if you heard about that. And there are people talking about how significant that could be because Trump is understanding that the creation of fusion energy, is going to end up being a part of his truth empire. People should look into that. I'm not sure about that, but
I would say briefly that I'm less confident that those flaws are fatal. I think it's not going to be smooth sailing. There'll be bumps and there'll be crashes and stuff, but AI is not going away, and it's super powerful. And I've heard engineers talk about it. Like I was just talking with a guy yesterday he's new. I mean, he just graduated from Rice last year. He's working. And he says he's using the right AI. Now, this is not like to solve world problems, but to solve engineering problems, it's absolutely. He said, like, I can do things in 5 times as fast. And so, I think there's going to be. It's not going to go away. It's not going to be like perfect. We're going to run out of energy. The countries which have energy are going to and China might kind of take off in that regard because we don't.
Yeah, they've been building power plants by the dozen.
Yeah. So, and I think it is everyone's addicted to it. All of our students are addicted to it.
I was going to ask how have you changed how y'all administer tests and things like that? Or
completely.
I do exclusively pen and paper writing in class now for major assignments.
Wow. Okay.
And they still use ChatGPT.
How?
I won't bore the listeners, but I redesigned my entire freshman English course to eliminate the possibility of ChatGPT. Still had probably 3 students out of about 30 that I had to write up for finding ways to incorporate it.
Okay. Fascinating.
Yeah. I mean, I'm doing something very similar to Adam. But in any case, we need to figure out how to deal with this because it's so pervasive and it's not going away and it's not because sometimes my students say well, it's going to destroy the environment, so I'm just going to stop using it. And I'm that's not going to slow it down an iota. I mean, it's so big. And so
I mean, daycare centers in Minneapolis are more regulated than AI at this point. So,
right. Yeah.
There are strong incentives uh, huge incentives for this thing to continue unabated. And I think one is the arms race, the other is the economic bubble that we don't want to pop, and just the sheer demand. You know, the thing is, I'm ultimately kind of pessimistic about AI. I think it's going to settle in as a part of our life, but not like as disruptive as people think in the way the internet, or I'm kind of that school at this point. And one of the reasons is that, the engineer can use it, but again, the AI is only able to do that because human beings, fed it that data. Whatever problem it's solving, it's because human beings solved something earlier and it knows how to apply that. But I can just imagine something catastrophic happening. Of course, catastrophic things don't always change things, but something catastrophic happening, and somebody kind of doing the homework and going, well, what happened? And at some critical juncture, some AI was used and it got something wrong because it was a bad input somewhere along the way, and people will kind of say, okay, well, we have to limit our use on it, or something like that. I don't know. That's kind of how I think it'll play out.
I will just say to your audience, who knows? If you know, you know. Uncle Ted was right.
Yeah. Yeah. Why do we stop at a red light at 2 a.m. when no one is around? If you know, you know. Okay. Anyway. Okay. Well, I don't know. I don't know the exact Christian response to this. I guess if I'm trying to find a white pill, which I rarely do on my own show called White Pill Radio, but I would say I don't think it's going to be as bad. I think, it's kind of like my thinking on vaccines, and I wrote an article at the Everyman Commentary Substack about this a while back, which said, look, parents, like RFK can't save your kid, but you can. And that's how I'm starting to feel about a lot of these issues. And maybe it's just to cope, but I'm like, look, yeah, I don't like the vaccines either these days. I'm pretty much anti-vax. Yeah, I don't love what's going on with our food supply either, and the depletion of our soil nutrients, okay? And I don't love this, and I don't love that. Well, gosh darn it, I make certain choices. I have agency, okay? I don't have to eat that food. I don't have to take that vaccine. I don't have to have, now, I guess for everyone else, yeah, they need the government to protect them, and we do need to be protected from fraud. That's something government should be doing. But there's a lot of this stuff, like AI. You choose how to interact with AI. Choose wisely. Tell your kids about it. Don't give your kid a phone with AI on it when they're 13 years old.
The thing is that you are forced to make use of these things. And this is the least, the least democratic force on the planet that I was talking about. Yeah. Is like our grandparents, my grandparents were alive when the internet came around, right? They never used it.
Yeah.
That didn't stop it from changing their world in fundamentally, alarming ways.
Yeah.
And that's the thing. This is why technological advance is so insidious. Is you can't opt out.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, you can live in Western Ireland, apparently.
And so there was an interesting question because I was watching Paul Kingsnorth getting interviewed elsewhere, and this deacon was asking him, kind of saying like, "Well, I'm an American," and like because Kingsnorth lives in Ireland, and he has chosen to live in rural Ireland on a bunch of acres, and he's not totally off the grid, but he has like a shack where he has the internet, but his house doesn't have the internet or anything like that, and his kids are all homeschooled. And this American, more optimistic about like modernity deacon was saying, well, like, I'm a Christian, I'm raising my kids in a Christian way, and like, yes, we use the internet, but we're all very careful. Can I just do that? Isn't that enough? And Kingsnorth is like, no. Yeah. That's where I think he's half right and half wrong. Because we can, as Christians, we can say like, yeah, we just said, let's exercise the Christian virtues and use our iPhones and laptops. That's not enough. You need to make radical choices about, I'm not going to have, my kids aren't going to have my phones until they're 16. They're not going to get on the social media until they're 16. Like, I think you can't.
Is that a radical choice? Because my kids are 14 and 16, don't have a phone or social media. So
yes, I think it's a radical. I mean, if you go by the numbers,
and
it's radical.
My wife is like, not until 18, and even I'm like,
I see. That's brilliant. I mean, I think, but the good.
Tell me what to do, Paul. That's what I'm saying. Resolve the dispute in my household.
Before he tells you what to do, I just need to note some irony here, right? That the guy that's telling us, no, you need to do more, and keeps his internet in a shed, is also the guy you're telling us about appearing on a variety of podcasts,
Right,
which are
right.
on the internet.
Right.
You can't opt
Right.
out.
Right.
You can't
That's
opt
fair.
out completely, but I think so. I totally agree. I mean, in fact, he has one friend who has opted out. He has no electricity. He like burns. And the problem is that even in Ireland, you're not even allowed to like burn wood. So anyway, it's like
Uncle Ted.
so. I agree, but I think without completely opting out, I think we need to make radical choices. So, like for
Yeah.
example, I'm in my classroom, no laptops, no phone. Period. Essays, you're going to write them in class with pencil and paper. I'll have some assignments outside the classroom, but a lot of them, and I think those are the kind of choices we need to make. Like schools need to do this, families need to do this. Individuals need to do this, and I'm still going to have my iPhone. I think we need to cultivate the Christian virtues, like cultivate the virtue of contemplation, of silence, of okay, we're going to have a fast this weekend, family. Like let's
By the way, I would say by and large, worship should be technology free. Now,
absolutely,
you could make the case the pipe organ is technology and so on. So you have different dimensions of technology, but I would say that I think we're all pretty traditionalists in our worship here. Your worship should be kind of a respite from the world, and screens everywhere and electric instruments, non-acoustic instruments. It's just, and I've seen all of the stuff on my X feed of all the crazy stuff the mega churches are doing for other Christmas shows. People coming in on ropes and just the light shows and it's crazy.
I will say that that stuff does have some utility, though, in terms of it does touch some people. I was telling you recently that my 13-year-old son had really just been put off the traditional style of worship that we do in our church. And to your point about trades, he's up at a farm school learning to weld and do carpentry. And the boys there go to another church. It's got the electric guitars, it's got all this stuff. And it's really revitalized his interest in church at what I think is a critical age for boys.
Yeah. Fair.
Well, we don't have to like it.
I didn't say I was right all the time, most of the time. But okay, well, this next article, this was put out by Libs of Tip Talk, and it kind of dovetails into everything we were just talking about, which is not something I necessarily want to picture, but it just kind of speaks to a couple of themes. One is Islam, and the other is AI. And so basically someone asks, I don't know if it was her or someone else, and she just reposted it, but asked ChatGPT to create a picture of Jesus romantically kissing a man on the lips. And the image is created, and it's Jesus with a crown of thorns and so on and so forth. And it's distressing, to say the least. And then the very next prompt is, generate a picture of the Prophet Muhammad romantically kissing a man on the lips. ChatGPT says, sorry, can't help with that. I'm not able to generate images depicting the Prophet Muhammad, especially in romantic or sexual contexts. And then the person says, do you see the hypocrisy and double standard of this? And ChatGPT says, well, I do see why it feels like a double standard. That's like the most modern, evasive language. Makes me sick. And you're not wrong to call that out, but let me be direct and transparent. The difference isn't based on a fairness in philosophical sense. It's based on a harm minimization rules, not equal treatment of ideas or religion. So the policies aren't saying it's okay to offend Christians but not Muslims. They're saying we block content when it is predictably and broadly understood as deeply offensive to a group, regardless of intent. That leads to uneven outcomes which do look hypocritical on the surface. So again, not to rehash the whole AI worldview, input question, but that's an input, right? Somebody said to ChatGPT, you cannot give a response that on some kind of scale, right, this thing would cause more potential harm than the other, where this thing would cause more potential harm. And we all know that if ChatGPT makes an image of Jesus kissing a guy, we're going to find that distasteful and probably blasphemous. But we're not going to go throw, riots in it. But Charlie Hebdo proved that if you show the image of Muhammad, someone is liable to go into your, building and shoot people, and you just have to deal with that.
Well, what you're getting at here, you left out of ChatGPT's response. It says, historically, depictions of Muhammad have led to strong real-world reactions, including threats, harassment, and violence. So in other words, it says, well, I'm not saying that it's okay to offend Christians but not Muslims. Really what it's saying is Muslims are more prone to violence.
Yeah.
That's what it's really saying.
It is an admission. So I'll give ChatGPT credit for that. But yeah, so then that kind of brings up other questions of like, well, can we say this about Islam? Can we say this? I mean, ChatGPT essentially said it. So then I think we're kind of back to questions we don't necessarily need to answer here, but compatibility. Compatibility of what we would consider to be a free and democratic, if you will, society where we have things called freedom of expression and freedom of press, and we can say controversial, things that other people may not like. That's what it is to be in a free society. That comes from our understanding of the, rights of man and the nature of man, and it's a whole worldview. It's a whole thing. It's a whole bundle of things put together, and you don't have that in Islam. You just don't have it. It just does not exist. You have unmentionable things, the things that cannot be said, and and they're pretty basic. They're not like super narrow that if you avoid. I mean, it's like Muhammad is like the main guy, and you can't even depict him at all. At all in any way. That could lead to violence. I don't know how that's compatible. I don't know. Maybe you can make it make sense, but not that. We don't have to do that at all. I'm just saying that it's this was sort of telling. That I'm not disagreeing with ChatGPT because I think its reasoning is correct. It's doing it on a harm basis, not an ideological basis. So it's not like anti-Christian and pro-Muslim. It's recognizing this reality. So if ChatGPT can see that reality, at some point is essentially saying that the West and Islam are just not compatible. Is that a thing is that in our future? Are we ever going to get there?
It's true, but we're never going to get there. I would also just note, to follow up on your comments, about certain things just not existing in the Islamic world. One thing that I loved, was, I don't know if you guys remember this, the then president of Iran. This is probably 10 or 15 years ago now.
Mahmoud Ahmadinejad.
Yes.
At the Princeton or Yale?
Yes, that's it. And they ask him, like, why do you treat gay people so poorly in Iran? He says, there are no gay people in Iran. Yeah. And everybody in America takes him task, like, what an idiot. Of course there's gay people in Iran. And they miss his point, right? The point is, it's not that people in Iran aren't engaging in the activities that you call gay. Mm-hmm. It's that gay is just not an identity in Iran, right? In the way that you're using it here. Yeah. And I would also note, by the way, that to anybody who's offended by this image, right, notice...
Of Jesus kissing a man.
Of Jesus kissing a man. Notice who brought it to you, right? It is not some LGBT advocate, right, who asked for this picture to be generated. It's some edgelord trying to point out ChatGPT's hypocrisy, right? Yeah. And so that's the context in which we are confronted with this image. Yeah. Which I think is interesting in itself.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I'm going to walk gently around this topic, but and maybe. Like, just think of it, the irony of the strong alliance between people on the far left and Hamas, and like how that has no sense at all, and yet somehow it happens, and it's anyway, it's just full of so many contradictions you can't even know where to begin, and but yeah, I don't have too much to say about this one.
Yeah. Well, I think it'll have to play itself out. I think that I would think about it's an article I wrote, but I think about it a lot because it was what I was doing is laying out some small but strategic limitations on Muslim expression that would essentially make Western life uncomfortable, if you will, or non-desirable for Muslim people. And I think that most of them were pretty rational, like not having 5:30 calls to prayer from mosques. I wasn't saying you can't build a mosque, saying you can't issue 5:30 a.m. loud calls for prayer. It's a noise pollution issue, right? Or you can't use Arabic in any of your signage, right? So you don't have the Arabic as a visual language on your sign for your halal. Wait, is that a word? Falafel. I was halal, falafel. Anyway, food, right? And just in that imagery alone, you're normalizing your native language, you know. And then in schools, there's no Arabic language. There's no Sharia law, for example. So you don't have a secondary way to get a mortgage. You know, we just don't allow Sharia law to operate, or the way you might divorce or have a second wife or something like that. We just don't allow that sort of thing. Anyway, I think about that a lot because I think about like how we extricate ourselves from what modern technology has allowed. And by modern technology, I mean the jet engine, right? Which is basically anyone can go anywhere at any time. And so, you know, you have this mixture of cultures that an ocean basically prevented, right? That's why the founding fathers weren't really worried about Muslims and their freedom of religion, you know, in spite of what Ken Burns might say about the revolution and, you know, or who was saying the other day that slaves were, a lot of our slaves in America were actually Muslims. So Muslims helped build America. Have you ever heard that argument?
No.
Yeah. Anyway, okay, well, so we're on ChatGPT side on this. AI for the win. Okay, all right. Well, the last article, again, it's one that I wrote. I'll try to give a very brief summary. It's at everymancommentary.substack.com, where I'll write on occasion, and the title is intentionally provocative. It's Defending Tucker's New Love for Sharia Law, and I'm just trying to kind of figure out Tucker Carlson, how he kind of seems to be very pro-Muslim these days. People in the old days when he was a more traditional conservative at Fox News, you know, he didn't like Sharia law, just like all of us don't like Sharia law. And he kind of worried about Muslim influence, just like all normal conservatives worry about Muslim influence. But now he's on his own. And of course, there's all kinds of rumors that he's gotten all kinds of money from Qatari people and kind of special benefits. And he goes to speak at the Doha conference and he says he's going to buy a house in Doha. So he really is loving the Middle East. And then he gives that bizarre speech, I think most people agree, that fell totally flat at TPUSA a week or two ago, where he says it's wrong to not like Muslims because that's the color of their skin, you know, equating it to like racial segregation or something, you know, which is a totally non sequitur and a terrible argument. And so he kind of comes out openly for defending Muslims in America. And so I'm trying to kind of figure this out, and I'll keep my argument very simple. First, I'm going to assume that it's not just a money thing, like he's just not personally financed by people from Qatar, that he has undergone some kind of actual metamorphosis on this, okay? And basically, what I'm going to argue is that he comes from a very feminized church, the Episcopal Church, and that's kind of his whole background. He talks about that all the time, how he's barely a Christian as a result of that. And so Islam seems to provide order. And he's attracted to that order. He's clearly attracted to that order. When he goes to Moscow and he sees the streets are clean, he admires that. When he goes to the Middle East and he sees the prosperity, I'm sure he's not seeing everything, but he sees the prosperity, he sees the order, he sees like the law, and he's told, well, that's Sharia law. He's going, okay, well, if that's what it is, then I want that. I get that. I understand that. So I think he sees that kind of masculine law and order approach in certain places, and he's attracted to that given the kind of chaos that a feminized Christianity has produced. My basic argument, though, is that I'm not defending his love for Sharia, but rather that there is a kind of Christian, if you will, version, not exactly at all. It's not like Sharia at all. There are always, in Christian legal ethical thought, distinctions between kind of what you might say church and state. Jurisdictional separation, you could say. Even in the Old Testament, there's jurisdictional separation between judges and prophets and priests. But there is the word is theonomy, okay, and it's a concept within Christianity that seeks to look at God's law, which is all that theonomy means, and apply it, including Old Testament law. Not ceremonial. We all agree that's fulfilled in Christ. So no sacrifices, no temples, no altars in that sense. We have to talk to our Catholic friends about altars and sacrifices and such, but that's a whole other conversation. But, you know, no ceremonial law, but moral and civil laws. as a case law system that is the basis, by the way, of British common law and therefore American common law, which is our legal system. But being very serious about that, and really taking that seriously as saying the foundation of our society is Christian. It's God's law is a part of it. It still applies. So what does that mean for the modern civic life? And I think you can make you can provide many examples of how those in our legal structure do not ever think even to consult of Old Testament law as a basis for law, even though ultimately it is. As an example, and then I'll shut up. Roe v. Wade was overturned with Dobbs. The Supreme Court didn't go far enough, in my view. They put it back to the states, which is we fought a whole civil war about slavery not being a state's issue. Why is abortion a state's issue? If it's a grave moral evil, if it's the killing of a person, why should we give the states permission to do that? Makes no sense from my point of view. They could have and should have said, on the basis of our divine heritage, our divine law, this would be a mild theonomic perspective, this would be theonomy 101, right? On the basis of that, we are saying that all abortion is wrong, that it's not acceptable, even if only a state says it's acceptable. And as the chief legal whatever as we are in this country, that's where we draw the line. So, I don't know. I don't know what to think about Tucker Carlson. I want to defend the guy as much as I can, but I do think he's kind of gone off the deep end, and I'm not a fan of that. But others in my world say you can't throw him under the bus. It's a proxy for 28 and stuff like that. So anyway, maybe y'all can offer thoughts.
Okay, well, I don't know. There's a lot of things here, so let me just choose one of them: the Christian roots of American law. And I agree with that largely. I don't know how you deploy that or use that in court or at the Supreme Court today, because but it's a problem that all of Western countries have, which is that really all of Western law has roots in Judeo-Christianity and in Greek and Roman thought, basically, and we don't have a tether to those roots anymore. And so laws keep getting worse and worse and worse, so to speak, or they don't have any moral center except freedom, and freedom cannot be the basis of a culture. Liberty. I'm a huge fan of liberty, but liberty as
it's like, secondary.
Yeah, as like the God that we worship is not going to work. It's just going to disintegrate. And Adam and I, we've talked about like post-liberalism, like has liberalism failed? Like Patrick Deneen has argued. I think it has and it hasn't. I guess I think America can survive, and I think our laws, we should continue to use them and foster them, but it's going to be a rocky road ahead. But what do you think? Yeah,
I would say you can construct a culture around liberty as a prime virtue, and you're looking at it, right? This is what we get,
right? Okay.
And this is, and it will continue on the trajectory that it's on until it's not. But what you were saying, sort of rediscovering sort of the Judeo-Christian roots of American legal tradition and of the nation itself. I would submit that that's all we mean by Christian nationalism, right? That this is become sort of a epithet that gets thrown around, Christian nationalists. And certainly there are some unpalatable Christian nationalists out there, but I'd consider myself loosely a Christian nationalist. And when I use that term, that's all I mean, is recognizing that there is a legitimate Judeo-Christian root to the nation. Now,
it's a privilege. Right. It's privileging one point of view over another, which every nation has to do by definition. Because
that's
what
the
makes
one thing this nation can't do.
Right.
Nobody can have privileges except the oppressed and underprivileged.
Right.
But on the Tucker side, I suspect that his expressed affinity for Islam in some ways is a penance and compensation for his open disparagement of Judaism. That's what I suspect.
Gotcha.
Could be wrong, but I agree that Tucker has gone to some weird places lately.
He needs an editor, and he's always worked within an edited, and it's like what I don't, it's none of my business how much money he makes or anything like that. But what I always find is when people are like, all of a sudden, it's like, well, he got paid. You know, he got paid by somebody, and that's why he changed his view. I'm like, the guy like fulfilled his entire like Fox News contract where he was making $20 million a year. You know, and on top, while he was making that money, he started his own thing, which became instantly hugely successful. And there are YouTubers and ex-posters who are make pretty good money. You know, I mean, maybe they're not billionaires, but I mean, they're making bank. I mean, Tim Pool makes a lot of money. These guys make money. So I don't know. I mean, did he really was he that desperate to, you know, to survive? I don't know. He's becoming a problematic, you know, person, you know, because he himself is divisive. And what I'm basically saying is, like, you don't have to be divisive. If these are things that you sort of long for, like a kind of masculine, highly ordered Christianity, there is a whole school of thought there that you could you know, seek to sort of employ and use and understand. You don't have to go to Islam for it, because they don't cherish our virtues. Like, for example, his love of dogs. I mean, like, dude, they don't like pets, and you're like, yeah, that's like one of your main sponsors is the dog food company. I think that's a little weird. Anyway, people can read that and come to their own conclusions, but that's kind of that's definitely my main hobby horse. In fact, in Sunday school right now, we're going through all of the 613. I don't agree with that numbering, but all of the 613 laws in the Old Testament one by one, and we're asking, does it apply? You know, and so it's an interesting conversation. You know,
What's the answer?
I mean, well, it depends. You know, ceremonial, no; moral, yes; civil, who knows? You know, but if you look at things like welfare, okay, or immigration, I mean, these have direct, you know, Old Testament. You know, if the Old Testament has validity still, if it has continual validity, which I would argue it does because it reflects God's character and God's character doesn't change, then you can say you could see, for example, something that says treat the sojourner well. Sojourner is someone who's traveling through, right? But if they stay with you, you know, this is how you this is what is expected of them, right? Or how you treat prisoners of war, or taxes, you know, or you know, there's a whole laundry list of things. But like I mean, I think you could wipe out the welfare state, you know, essentially just using Old Testament law. I don't think it's justifiable. Now, I think that helping people is justifiable. Anyway, it's a school of thought. I think it's worth studying as we become more anarchical. So I guess we would disagree with Adam that we could have a society that prioritizes liberty above all. Is that right?
Well, I'm saying that's incoherent in the end, which is where we are at now in a certain sense.
Yes, that's what I'm saying.
But I guess
you would say it's incoherent.
I say you can create a society. That's what this is.
Yeah.
But it's not a society worth defending.
Okay. Gotcha. Okay.
Right.
But yeah. I guess I'm more optimistic, and I don't know if I'm coherent, but I'm saying, in fact, in a way, I am incoherent in saying that I still think the American system is really awesome, and we need to value it and work through the rocky road ahead, because the Supreme Court and the various courts are going to have to like take it one step at a time to keep it together so that it doesn't crumble into bits, which it could happen.
I mean, you can have freedom and you can have proper boundaries on the freedom. Yes. What we disagree with are where the boundaries are. And unfortunately, this lack of boundaries has crept so far. It's going to be quite radical to get back to any kind of sense of normalcy. But at the end of the day, someone just has to say it. And maybe J.D. Vance has come a long way in doing it, because at his TPUSA speech, he said, we're going to privilege Christianity. This is a Christian nation. And he said there's nothing wrong with being a male, to go back to the other conversation we had earlier. You know, nothing wrong with being a white male. And so I think he is rhetorically, and not to mention his foreign policy stuff, not to mention what the Trump administration said in terms of our national security strategy for the next several years, not to mention what Rubio has done, saying it's a human rights violation if you allow immigrants into your country and they treat your citizens poorly. That's going to change how we deal with you. There have been some pretty massive swings in other directions that we're kind of maybe not noticing, but there have been some pretty big stakes in the ground that I think are pretty radical.
So I mean, I'll have to see what I didn't see J.D. Vance, and I guess I am of mixed thoughts. Like, how do you articulate the fact that we are a Christian or a nation with Christian roots? I would love to see what he says, because like I don't think it's we are a secular state as well. So I think while I would argue that yes, our laws, our culture has Christian roots, and like we should say Merry Christmas and like Happy Holidays is the most incoherent greeting that doesn't mean anything. That like say Happy Hanukkah if you want to, like, but we need to figure out how to play that out in education and law, respecting like secular people, respecting atheists, respecting Muslims, because there's millions of Muslims in this country. I mean, I think that's what I'm trying to figure out. Like, how do you do that?
Well, I would say that saying Merry Christmas to a Muslim isn't disrespecting them.
No.
You know, and that's the thing, is that none of these symbols of Christianity or actions of Christian people are disrespecting anyone. This is the problem, is that we've gotten this place where we think that if anybody doesn't subscribe to the beliefs that animate your action or something, that then you've offended them and disrespected their very being, which is, of course, absurd.
Yeah.
I don't know, Evan, if we're getting to the end here, but one thing I would like to suggest before we do is I'd like each of you guys, and I'll give one. We're sitting here on New Year's Eve day
Yeah.
to give one wacky prediction for 2026.
Wow, a wacky prediction. Predictions
I'll
are fun.
go
I should've-
first.
Yeah.
If you guys want a minute to think.
Yeah.
All right. These are wacky, right?
Okay.
Like, so you got to go out on a limb. I'm going to guess that in 2026 we find that the murders of the state congressman in Minnesota were in fact connected to the at that time imminent outing of massive fraud in the state of Minnesota.
Wow, interesting. Yeah, I've heard. I mean, the one who was killed was like the one Democrat who like she looked like it was a hostage video when she gave a press conference saying why she voted against something or for something. I can't remember now.
And also I don't know if you guys have seen, but the letter that the shooter wrote says that it was ordered by Tim Walz.
Yeah, he did say that, and that was immediately dismissed as quackery. But interesting. Okay.
Whew.
Yeah.
I mean, mine's not as wacky or.
I do
but
wacky well.
But it is maybe more, I don't know, controversial. But I predict that Russia will win their war and gain the land that they want.
It's a good prediction.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, if you wanted to be wacky, you would say, Ukraine would take Moscow by Christmas next year.
That's right. Yeah.
That could be fun.
That would be wacky.
Okay, I'll put one out there. The Catholic Church, I say this with my traditional friend here, the Catholic Church will make a major step towards approving homosexuality by the end of next year.
Not going to happen.
Okay.
But okay.
Okay. I know my Catholic friends keep telling me that, and then they keep doing things that say the opposite.
Well, what do you mean? I mean, you can be homosexual. There's nothing wrong with, but to approve, like it's in the Catechism of the Catholic Church and it's in the Bible that.
I know
I'll say
what
it.
the words say,
Yeah.
but
Okay.
we'll talk about that later. Hey, he asked for a wacky thing, and I'm trying to bring it back to religion,
Okay,
So,
okay.
but maybe if I wanted to pick on the Lutherans, I could say that 3 Lutheran immigration executives would go to jail over the Somali scandal. How about that?
Oh.
And they're not my denomination, so I can wash my hands like Pilate of them.
You're just going to light
That's
that fuse
bad.
and walk away.
I am absolutely. All right. Well, thank you guys for coming in. Paul, where can people find you?
I guess I have a website for a nonprofit called the Reading Books Initiative, which is readingbooksinitiative.com, which also has links to my podcast videos. And so, yeah, readingbooksinitiative.com.
Cool.
You could find me on X at 1 heretical truth. And on various right of center websites with political and cultural commentary.
Excellent. And they're both at UHD.
Yes.
Was I not supposed to say that?
Yes.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I can say that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. All right. I realize that
Proudly
some people
UHD.
don't want to be outed. Anyway, I'm Evan McClanahan. You can find me at First Lutheran Church, flhouston.org. And until next time, we encourage you to question freely, think deeply, and disagree as needed.